In 2009, we had a tax code that would render us over $4 billion to close the $3.5 billion budget gap for next year. I want to repeat that. We had a tax code in place that is going to expire and sunset at the end of this year. We had a tax code in place that would have raised over $4 billion to balance the budget of $3.5 billion deficit next year. What Governor Cuomo did in his three-card Monte scheme is he has the public thinking that he's actually raising the tax on the rich. But in fact, if you look at the last 2 years, the rich are now, under his scheme, going to pay less. The middle class gets a 0.4% decrease in their taxes, which saves them around $200.
We're introducing legislation in Albany that would require all newly hired police officers to be residents of the city of New York. If you live in New York City, you're more likely to respect and have some care for the health and the well-being and the future of New York City. If you live in our city, you're more likely to understand our community. If you live in New York City, you're more likely to show some respect for the tremendous racial and cultural diversity in New York City, the diversity that makes us great. A residency requirement for the police department is not an extraordinary measure. In fact, it exists in many other major cities throughout the country. The Philadelphia Police Department has a residency requirement. The Boston Police Department has a residency requirement. The Chicago Police Department has a residency requirement. We need a similar requirement right here in New York City.
Good evening. Welcome to On the Spot. It's an interesting show this week. We got all our guests was from Meet the Candidates series a few years ago. Now we're going to open up with Saquan Jones. It's my far right. Next we got Terry Hines. He's running for the 58th Assembly District. We got Big Rob here. He's running for the 56th District Leader. We'll open up with you, Saquan. Assemblyman Hakeem Jefferies and City Councilman Charles Barron is running for Ed Towns' retired seat.
I mean, this is going to be a really, we talked about it on the last show. Like I said, I don't really like both of the candidates because I think that there's a completely different contrast between the two, but from a legislative standpoint, I'm not really in love with either of them. I know that Rob's district, overlaps a large portion of the 9th Congressional District. I know Terry's district also overlaps a nice little portion of the Congressional District. But I would like to throw, to the candidates, like, as candidates who are going to be in a public figure, if you are potentially elected, like, how do you feel about working with either a candidate? Are there some sort of commonalities that you both have, and if there are any potential differences that you think that you would like to change and work with them better? Do you think that would work for you in your candidacy, Rob?
Well, for me, with full disclosure, I got to say that I'm also the president of VITA, which is the Vanguard Independent Democratic Association. I think we're one of the first clubs that actually endorsed Hakeem early in the race. And I think I told you earlier that one of the reasons that I did that was, as the president, we joked about that there's a thing on the street that they say how you start something, you have to finish it. And I really wanted to start my life in public office being constituent first. And the constituents called for, and there was a vote drawn for Hakeem Jefferies over both Ed Towns and Charles Barron. So for me, this is business. Mm-hmm. And it's the business of the people. So there's really nothing personal. I'm a legislative policy analyst at City Council, so I have to work with Charles Barron regularly. And we've had several conversations, whether it's in the lobby, on the elevator, in hearings about his candidacy. And he's clear that, my club and the members of my club wanted Hakeem Jefferies. And we're going to stick to that endorsement.
Well, I mean, he's raising a lot of money, Terry. I mean, I'll give you a chance to respond to that, too. He's raising a lot of money. Hakeem Jefferies raised a lot of money. We've seen instances where Charles Barron raised like $1,500 for city council races. I mean...
And win.
And win.
And win.
And win.
Charles has never raised any money.
Charles never, and that should speak, and I know that, you're running against Nick Perry, or potentially running against Nick Perry. We don't know if he's running for borough president, but I mean, what is your?
I think it's an interesting contrast in candidates, as you were stating. I think you have the fiery Barron versus the slick legislative Hakeem Jefferies, and the community. I'm very interested to see how the community is going to react to the race. The issue really becomes how do the candidates frame the race themselves, whether they're going to make it about the issues or whether they're going to make it about the candidates. And I think that's the concern people have, in that I believe there's a known dislike which Charles Barron has for Hakeem, and he hasn't hidden that issue.
Styles?
Yeah.
Do we say Styles? Can we say Styles?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a Styles issue. I know he's made it very clear that he has some issues with his opponent, and it's just interesting. I think if it's about the issues, it'll be a very good race.
And I think, Terry, I think that this race has the potential to polarize, communities of color again, right? And what happens is the constituents then become victims of politics again. And I know that you're concerned, and I'm concerned with having this whole process be more participatory for constituents.
Exactly.
And so I'm looking out to make sure that, it doesn't become polarizing to the point that, nobody knows what's going on, and we're disenfranchised as voters again.
So let me not interject, but what is the issue? Because we really know what the issue is and what it's going to be. What is the issue? Basically, the community has a problem with. Charles is fiery. Charles is going to come, say what he has to. He's not going to be liked by everybody. Of course, everybody knows Charles' style.
But isn't that what we need, though?
That's what you need, because you do know at the end of it all, Charles is going to talk about money.
Yeah.
Charles is going to talk about bringing money to our district. And then you got Hakeem up there, and a lot of the community feel like Hakeem is he going to look out for people that look like him? That's what Rob don't want to go too far, and nobody don't, but that's the reality on the street. I mean,
you got to break up. When I ran for city council, I broke up politicians into three sections. So you have legislators who are looking to introduce policy. You have the rah-rah siskumbal, who would be Charles Barron types who, social issues come up and they start screaming and yelling. And you have community organizers, who sort of develop these sort of issues and they galvanize people to affect certain things. You have Hakeem as a legislator, and Charles Barron is a rah-rah siskumbal. He is very fiery. But at the end of the day, Charles Barron only brought in a playground in Brownsville to be renovated. And Hakeem, I feel, has the ability to bring together multi-ethnicities, which his district is going to make up, like it or not, in the next 10 years. I'm not personally in love with either of the candidates, like I've said before, but I don't think there's anything wrong with galvanizing and making a separation within
Charles
the
got
black
more
community.
than just he got a lot of housing built and everything else. We can't take anything away. And don't worry, he will be here to explain it. If nobody comes, if Hakeem never comes, if he never comes, Charles is right down the block right now, and he'll come and tell you. But just one thing that you know with Charles, it's always going to be about what's coming to his district.
I agree with that.
And unlike no other politician in our community that we deal with, Charles is going to run down a list of things that he has brought back to his district. He don't want something like Walmart in to come and take away from other things. And I'm going to let him speak for himself. And I'm not endorsing anybody at this time. But what I am saying is the debate has to be on, and it might get ugly, and so be it.
I agree with Saquan that there are different types of candidates.
Yes.
And if you look at Hakeem's legislative body of work, so one of the knocks on Hakeem potentially could be that, for lack of a better term, he ain't black enough. Right?
Yes.
No, he is black enough.
No,
he's not.
Community-wise, you know what Rob is talking about. You know what Rob is talking about.
And that's what I wanted to speak to, though, because that is an issue. You know, I've endorsed him, so I have to bear the brunt sometimes of hearing what people have said. Right? So unfortunately, in our communities, being black enough means that either you're too well educated, either you have too many resources. Like, because on a personal note, I was in a gentrification argument. And the person turned to me and said, "We talking about you." So we are divided as a community in many ways. So when we talk about gentrification, they probably talking about you, Terry, and you, Saquan, with a graduate degree as a homeowner, under, and you got your house under 30.
Yeah, well, I was under 30.
Yeah, so they definitely talking. They definitely talking about you. So we have to be clear on, again, how we're viewing our candidates, and so what happens is we immediately think that Hakeem speaks to a different demographic than Charles would. So Charles speaks to public housing, the disenfranchised, and theoretically speaking, Hakeem could speak to a different demographic. And that's what I'm concerned about, because at the end of the day, we're all a community of color, and we need to be galvanizing to get issues that affect us.
Close it out, Terry.
Right, the issue is, what do you want, right? I like what Barron says sometimes, because it needs to be said by some politician. And sometimes he's the only one that's willing to say it. The question then becomes, well, do you get results from what you're stating, right? And the issue with Hakeem, you like to see the ambition. I like that he can bring many different cultures together.
Wrap it up. They're giving us the signal. We got to wrap it up.
So it's two different. It really comes down to what the community's going to want in the end.
And we'll be back. We're back. New York got a problem. We're going to open up with Terry. New York has a problem. It's term limits. Elected officials of color will have a problem in this year and next year. Everybody's vying for different seats, and they're no more friends anymore. Of course, I want your seat tomorrow. Can you elaborate on that?
I don't know if it's a problem. I don't view it as a problem. I think what you see is the ambitions of politicians. Not only that, but they're being forced to now look at other things. We had a system where politicians would sit in one seat for forever.
Charlie Rangel.
And then the young, ambitious types who were looking to get into politics, who were looking to effectuate change, they were never given the ability to do so. I think the problem that the black community may have is that when we have these elected officials vying for new positions, we do need to work together to see that we get to positions of power. And that's what's not happening. It's kind of fractured, where everyone is fighting for everybody else's seat, and there should be a little more teamwork to get there.
Well, but I don't understand why it's a bad thing, right? So if you look at it from just a Brooklyn-based level, right?
Give us some names.
The potential is that Terry's going to go against Nick Perry.
Yes.
Nick Perry may potentially go for borough president because Marty Markowitz is out of there.
Eric Adams
may get it too, but now you leave his senatorial district open to somebody who may be able to get there too. So now you got Rob, Rob and I both ran against Al Van. Al Van didn't come to one debate, raised $1 billion, and didn't do anything, and still won, which I feel is a travesty to the situation. But now, because of term limits, Rob is able to go back out there potentially for the city council seat, and do well. Why do we in Brooklyn have to make this an ethnic issue? Like we have to save black politics, as if it hasn't been probably one of the most detrimental things to our community in the first place. I mean,
I think this is reminiscent of the old saying where you're a product of your own success. In regards to, as a district leader, we have to deal with civil and Supreme Court justices seating them, and because there have been so much opportunity for people of color to sit on the civil court bench, now there's a bottleneck for Supreme Court. So you got civil court judges who are now all seasoned and of color who are fighting for 2 or 3 seats at the Supreme Court level, ready to kill each other.
Why is that bad?
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that we're now a product of our own success. So because the success stories are vast in terms of black elected officials and more black qualified people entering into the political game, because the numbers were very small. But now you got black people with graduate degrees. You throw a rock and you could hit somebody with a graduate degree in Bed-Stuy, where it used to not be like that, or in Flatbush. So there's so much success that it's now causing a bottleneck. I'm not saying it's bad, but now people are going at each other's throats because there's not enough seats available. There's not enough representation in this borough for people of color. If you look at, when I talk about Supreme and Civil Court, when you look at the fact that, 74% of the individuals that are sentenced in Kings County Supreme Court are of color, but you only got 2 or 3 judges, that doesn't even make sense. So I represent of color.
Okay.
So that doesn't make sense. That means our representation is very low. And if you look at the fact that we are the majority people of color in this city, and certainly in Brooklyn, our representation should say that, but it still doesn't. And that's why we're trying to kill each other for seats, because the representation is so small.
So how is it helpful?
But it's helpful because even building on Rob's point, I'm an attorney, you go before the civil court judges, the quality that you see now versus the quality you saw years before, it's not even close. And building on Saquan's point, he was talking about my opponent. My opponent's been there for 20 years, and he's not running for borough president this year, so he's going to run for that seat again. You've been there for 2 decades. He's had 2 opponents in that time frame. So the question becomes, when do you stop hearing what the people have to say? If I'm there for 20 years, am I really, really concerned about what the neighbor down the block has to say, or am I trying to kind of finagle my way now to my next seat, or try to, get my next chip to go further?
I mean, and I hear what you're saying, Norm, as far as if you keep the people in, or I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, but I'm just saying that the idea of it is that you keep these politicians in. What difference would it be what Bloomberg did? I don't want to make this a racial issue.
No.
Bloomberg pretty much did the same thing. He said, you know what, I don't want to leave, so I'm going to,
and
do what I want
Giuliani
to
tried
do.
it before him.
Yeah, so this is not a racial issue, but this is more of an issue of, people in power don't want to give it up.
I
But
agree.
it's being forced, and if you want to stay there, then it's survival of the fittest. That's how it's always been throughout the history of time. And I don't look at this as a bad thing. I don't look at this as, you should be granted the seat because you were there before. But I think that, you have 2 viable candidates right here, right now, and some others who are potentially there. And I like Eric Adams if he runs for borough president. I like a lot of people who are running. And then the fact that
James is running for
Public advocate.
And then we have, you got Bill de Blasio who's running for mayor. John Liu may not run because he has some sort of monetary issues based off his fundraising.
Don't forget about Billy Thompson.
Bill Thompson's going to run.
Wait. But why did you give us that, though, bro?
I've never seen an instance where a person runs and then loses and then sort of comes back and wins again. Usually the person you lose, you got Al Gore, you got, John Kerry, you have all types of people who usually run. And then but then it always dies down. I don't see in my lifetime where a person who ran for such a high position sort of was able to get it the next go around. Especially when Wiener was supposed to be there, and people sort of forgot about Thompson at the end of the day. So I like Thompson. I hope that he does well, but I don't think that he's going to be Christine Quinn. Or at the end of the day, Scott Stringer. So I mean, you have some really great candidates that are going to come with a ton of money.
But that's the point. Because of redistricting and because candidates are being forced to move, or elected officials are being forced to move from one spot to another, you get to see some great leadership moving up. I think a lot of people are saying they're excited to see what Eric Adams would bring as borough president. I'm excited to see what Tish James would bring if she got the opportunity to become public advocate. So, and again, you would also want to see what Rob would bring if he was getting a chance to move up as well.
Them candidates that was just named, I'm still trying to figure out what some of them are doing. It's a little different with Eric. When being in the state senate, it becomes difficult to see what he's doing, but I want to see you out here. I see a lot of negativity from Eric coming. It's not totally negative. Tell the kids to pull their pants up. It's not negative. But money can be given to other communities when something happens. Someone gets shot. Another community got shot, one of their security people, and Eric found some money. It's happening in our neighborhood on a regular basis.
I mean,
I want to see these guys, okay, y'all need to be challenged for real. Let these term limits come. But I'm glad to see someone like Terry, someone like Rob coming out here and keeping their feet held to be accountable for what they're doing, because they're not doing anything. I don't think they're doing enough. I don't think they do enough, especially in the state, legislative in the state. I don't think there's enough being done by these guys. I want to see a lot more, and I want to hear people challenge Cuomo. So with that note, we're going to close this segment out, and we'll be back. In our last segment, we're going to let the candidates tell us a lot about themselves. Rob, it's very important for you to explain what does a district leader do. You touched on it. And what will you be trying to do if you get elected again?
Well, I'm excited about being a district leader. District leader is a party position. It's the Democratic Party position, and basically you vet Democratic candidates for seats, everything from the president to judicial candidates. So I'm very excited about continuing to do that. Also, we're responsible for the vetting and seating and voting on civil and Supreme Court judges, as well as making sure that polls are covered with Democratic, registered Democratic voters. So that's the basics for that. But I'm proud because I think that I've set a new paradigm for what district leaders do. And if you ask anybody who probably has encountered me, they ask me everything from, helping with public housing to whatever, and we haven't said no to that. So, being a public servant as a district leader has meant that I've broadened the parameters. I think some district leaders may be a little angry with stuff that we do here in the 56, because it has raised, I believe that it's raised the bar for what a district leader should look like and his commitment to the community. I would like to mention, though, that in 2013 I will be making another run for city council. And based on some of the things that were brought up earlier, I think that being able to serve vigorously for 2 terms and then getting out is a very important thing, because I do believe that you get tired. This is a business where you're required to do a lot. And if you stay past your expiration date, then you may actually do constituents a tremendous disservice. So I think that 2 terms or 8 years in city council gives me enough time to focus my energy and be very productive, but look to do something else, whether it be to teach or come back to community service or something like that. So for me, city council is something that is matched with my personality. I work really hard for short control bursts and give a lot. And I think that's that's conducive. That seat is conducive to what my goals and aspirations are and my abilities.
2 questions. Wait, let me just ask these 2 questions here. One, district leader is not a paid job, am I correct?
I have to laugh because I remind myself, actually my wife reminds me of that often, that the extra probably 6 to 8 hours I spend a day on district leader work, as we've prescribed it, there is no monetary reward for that.
Okay.
I mean, I before I ask Terry, what his candidacy is, but I just want to say I commend Rob. We ran against each other in the city council, and I had a really dislike for a lot of the candidates, and Rob was definitely not one of them. And it wasn't a dislike of sort of personal issues. It was just if I lost to a certain candidate, I didn't feel like they were going to be right for the district, and I just never felt that way about Rob, at all. And I would do everything I could to make sure if when he runs for office, I'm not going to be running, that he would be one of the people that would sort of represent the district. Terry, I know personally for a ton of years, but I don't want to make it seem like you're getting some preferential treatment. You got an uphill battle against somebody who's been there for 2 decades.
2 decades.
And at the end of the day, he will probably do what Al Van did when Rob and I ran, and not sort of debate you, not engage you, and sort of rely on his name. And how do you see yourself, I know that you're a part of the community board in that district, and you can talk about that, but how do you see yourself sort of overcoming that?
Well, I'm actually chairing the community board at the present time. I guess the way you overcome that is you buy like 17 pairs of shoes, and you knock on every single door, you speak to every single constituent, and you treat everybody's vote as though it matters, it's gold. You don't get to that position without a lot of work, and I think what I'm trying to let a lot of the constituents know is that the reason I'm running is because I'm a father with a son who's about to go to school, and I'm concerned that his education is not going to be at the level that I had when I was going to school. I'm running because I'm a father. Well, I should say I'm a husband who's concerned about the safety that my wife has when she walks the streets and goes home on a late night. Okay, I'm running because I'm actually a homeowner, and I struggle like everybody else struggles to make my mortgage payment every single month. I'm running because I'm a grandson, and I'm worrying about my grandmother and hoping that she will be able to retire with dignity. So the issues that matter to the people of my community matter to me. And if I fail them, I'm failing myself. So I'm not going there just to please myself or to big up my ego. I'm going there because these things really matter. I need to see that my son does well. I need to see that my grandmother does well. So I really have a vested interest in what goes on in this community.
And I know that, Norm, you talk about the state stuff all the time. I mean, I'm sure you're ready to like...
I'm disgusted with the state. And Saquon get mad at me when I say it. I've asked everybody from top to bottom where was the stimulus money. Saquon, but you just don't realize, because we don't have jobs in our community. But my district is 11233, and the people don't realize there was $116 million for this community in the stimulus fund. Had we got it, what could we have done? If you gave 100 businesses of color $1 million apiece, they could have stimulated the economy. And this is the problem. When things are available, I didn't like that when I asked my elected officials in the state about the money, all the elected officials of color had no idea.
The issue that gets me is, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a finding that the calculation that was used to fund schools had favored upstate more than favored downstate.
$25 billion, right?
And there was an understanding that this money was supposed to come back to the city.
Yes.
And Cuomo has yet to find a way to turn on. Every year when the budget is being done, he's found a way to ignore this.
Wait, no, in all fairness, Cuomo hasn't been there long enough, because the reality, that was on Pataki, if I'm not mistaken.
It was on Pataki, but he's had an opportunity. He's had 2 budgets now. So I'm saying funding is more than anything will have an impact on how.
Come on, nobody's going against Cuomo.
But here's it. You sound like you scared too.
I'm not scared.
The assembly and the Senate is scared. You scared too. I mean, we can talk about it.
We can talk. I mean, we can talk about Robert and Jefferies stuff. I'm just saying that Cuomo. I'm not scared of Cuomo. I'm sure if we met in a dark alley, I would take him. But I mean, like, he's a powerful dude. You're not gonna go against Cuomo.
Terry, in all fairness, I think that somewhere along the line, that money should be in our districts. We should be able to find it. Things happen, deals were cut. I think they did an agreement with the courts and everybody that, of course, we took the short end of the stick, we get less money. But something happened with that money, and I would like you to come back and tell us that. Something happened, I can't recall exactly, but there's a reason why we didn't get all the money that we supposed to.
There's no excuse for it.
I agree, because it was about $25 billion. But
let Rob close it out on this.
Well, I candidates never get to ask each other questions, and we're not running against each other. But humor me. Do you believe that your law degree on a state position will benefit the constituents of your community being able to know the language?
You gotta make it fast.
Excellent question. I think you have to be able to translate the issues of your community into legislation, and I think understanding the law and how the law works will assist you in doing that. So it's a very good point.
Thank you, gentlemen, for a wonderful show. We'll be back next week. Glad to have you.